Today, the numbers are in from E-Trade, Schwab, and more, and they've confirmed what we've all been noticing. Amateur trading activity is higher than ever. Plus, Tesla posts another profit and gets one step closer to a major Wall Street milestone. And finally, we cut through all the noise around the search for a coronavirus vaccine and tell you which 3 companies are leading the race. I'm MacKenzie Sigalos, and this is CNBC After Hours. Let's take a look at how stocks finished the day. It's a sell-off on Wall Street, with all 3 major indices closing in the red. The loss comes after jobless claims data came in worse than expected. Now, the initial jobless claims data is just finance speak for the number of people who applied for unemployment benefits for the first time. Now, last week, initial claims increased by 1.4 million. This marks the 18th straight week that number was higher than 1 million. But that's not exactly the bad part. Take a look at this next chart. Even though more than 1 million people were filing for unemployment for 18 weeks in a row, that number was still declining for 15 straight weeks until today's data. So jobless claims are growing again, and we'll have to wait until next Thursday to see if this week was a fluke or if we've entered a second wave of job losses. But despite today's sell-off, retail investors, aka individual people like you and me, have been trading more than ever. E-Trade reported earnings from the second quarter late this afternoon and posted record high trading levels. The company saw a 267% increase in trades from the same quarter last year. E-Trade is a retail brokerage. Its customers are those retail investors we just spoke about, not the pros. And us amateurs can't seem to get enough stock trading right now. E-Trade's competitors, who also cater to people like us, Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, and Interactive Brokers, are all reporting record trading as well. CNBC's Kate Rooney has those numbers.
TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, and Interactive Brokers seeing record trading and customer growth last quarter. Analysts are cautious, though, that frenetic activity can hold up. Brokerage firms have now set the bar pretty high. Take a look at some of that triple-digit growth. At Charles Schwab, trades were up 126% year over year. TD Ameritrade, meanwhile, which is set to be bought by Schwab, saw a more than 400% increase year over year and a 62% jump from the prior quarter. Interactive Brokers, meanwhile, saw a 111% jump year over year. Across the board, firms say this was driven by individual retail traders. Analysts, though, are factoring in more muted growth for the second half of this year. Headwinds include sports coming back, stimulus checks eventually running out, and economies reopening, meaning less time at home for day trading. There's also low interest rates, putting some pressure on net interest margins. One factor that is sticking around, though, zero commissions. Analysts say that even if trading fizzles, growth should stay above where it was way back when you had to pay for trades.
Okay, let's get to our sound check. Here's a roundup of the day's biggest action and what the top newsmakers and business leaders had to say on CNBC's airwaves.
We have the enhanced unemployment insurance that's expiring next week, so that's a priority. We need to respond to that. As we've said before, we're not going to continue it in its current form because we're not going to pay people more money to stay at home than work, but we want to make sure that the people that are out there that can't find jobs do get a reasonable wage replacement. So it will be based on approximately 70% wage replacement.
Would you break them up?
Yeah.
You would?
Yeah.
All
it's
four
good
of
for
them?
competition. Yeah, it's good for competition. Look, they've all had a good run. And the reality is the incremental dollar of investment right now is relatively wasted inside these big companies.
But we're not anticipating anything close to full demand until there is a return of full demand until vaccine. We're prepared for that, and we'll be able to. And again, we'll be able to respond to whatever rate of progression that occurs between now and then. The real point of this is we're going to be here as demand returns, and the people of America are doing a great job of taking care of the customers that are flying.
So I think until we get out of this pandemic, you're going to see very few events or large gatherings. That's going to hurt travel. You're going to have quarantines in certain places at times. And then you're just going to have just general concerns about getting out and about.
We brought in a lot of new customers to our digital system. And the thing that's great is those new customers that came in, experienced delivery or order ahead, they signed up for our rewards program. And now our customer database is up to 15 million customers, with a heavily skewed to those new users. And we've learned a lot over the last couple of months on how to interact with them to really influence behavior.
There are now around 4 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the United States, according to Johns Hopkins University. And it's not just the number of cases that's rising. Hospitalizations and deaths in the U.S. are increasing as well. And experts say that for every case counted, there are several more that are not recorded, making the true case count much higher. Now, this pandemic has claimed over 140,000 American lives and stopped many businesses in their tracks. Now, we just heard from the American Airlines CEO who told us that normal air travel demand won't return until there's a vaccine. So when is a vaccine coming? Because honestly, it feels like every other day there's a new headline about another company developing a vaccine candidate or some new results from early clinical trials. So we decided to take a step back and get a sense of exactly where we are in the search for a coronavirus vaccine. CNBC's Meg Tirrell can break down those details and tell us which companies are leading the race.
Right now, there are probably more than 100 different vaccine candidates in some stage of development. But really the ones that are closest to potential reality, there are maybe half a dozen from a few major companies and then also from some younger, more startup-like companies. So there are some vaccines in China that seem to already being deployed on an emergency basis. But in terms of what's happening in the United States and in Europe, the companies really in the lead are Moderna, which is planning on starting its phase 3 trial in the US of 30,000 participants on Monday. Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech, they are also planning on starting that phase 3 sometime in the next week or so before the end of July. AstraZeneca, which is partnered with Oxford, is also in the lead and planning on starting a large phase 3 trial in the US in the next few weeks. So those are probably the three frontrunners right now. We know Johnson & Johnson is also starting its phase 1 trials around now and will potentially be in phase 3 by September. The government calls this project Operation Warp Speed, and they're not exaggerating. They set a goal at the beginning of 12 to 18 months to a vaccine. That goal has never been accomplished before. But right now, they're on track to meet that goal, and that's amazing. But the fastest vaccine in history that's ever been developed was 4 years, and that was an outlier. Typically, these things can take a decade. So when we talk about when a vaccine will be available, most people are talking about when the first ones will get approval, but then there won't be enough vaccine for everybody. So even if the first vaccines get approved toward the end of this year or early 2021, it's going to take months for them to actually be widely available enough for everyone, including healthy young people. We are starting to learn about some of the characteristics of these vaccines. For example, that many of them will require 2 doses. So you'll get 1 shot, and then about a month later, you'll probably have to go back and get another shot to boost up the immune response. One thing that scientists are also trying to learn about now is how long this protection from these vaccines will last. AstraZeneca was saying they're hopeful theirs will last at least a year, but this might be similar to the flu shot in terms of, needing to get another shot each year.
Time for today's numbers round. We'll kick it off with 4. Tesla posted its 4th consecutive quarter of profitability in its latest earnings report. So why is that noteworthy? Well, 4 straight profitable quarters is one of the eligibility requirements for a company to be added to the S&P 500, and it happens to be the last one that Tesla had to complete. Now, inclusion in that index isn't automatic. There's actually a committee that meets to decide these things. Research firm Baird says Tesla, with market cap around $300 billion, would be the largest company ever to be added to the S&P 500. Next, 186 million. In the second quarter, Twitter had 186 million monetizable daily active users, which is more than the 172 million that Wall Street was expecting, and 34% more than the platform had in the second quarter of 2019. Now, that's the highest year-over-year increase on record for Twitter. But even though the platform saw impressive user growth, the ad business took a hit as companies scale back marketing costs to ride out the economic fallout from the coronavirus. Twitter's advertising revenue fell 23% compared to the same quarter in 2019. And finally, 1.5 million. The Peacock mobile app was downloaded roughly 1.5 million times across the App Store and Google Play within the first 6 days of the streaming service's launch, according to analytics firm Sensor Tower. Now, these numbers aren't a complete representation of overall consumer use of Peacock, but it can provide a glimpse into some early adoption. Now, for some context, Peacock was downloaded 25% more times than short-form streamer Quibi in that company's first 6 days. But Peacock's 1.5 million installs represent just 12% of the 13 million downloads that Disney Plus saw in its first 6 days. We should note, Peacock is part of our parent company, NBC Universal. That's it for After Hours, but before we go, here's one more thing to keep an eye on. On Monday, the CEOs of 4 tech giants, Bezos from Amazon, Zuck from Facebook, Cook from Apple, and Sundar Pichai from Google, will testify before the House Judiciary Committee. The hearing is part of the committee's probe into these companies and the competition landscape across big tech. Now, you don't want to miss it, so catch all the details on CNBC.com and on the CNBC app. We'll be right here in our home office every Tuesday and Thursday with a new edition of After Hours, so be sure to catch us then.